Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, the United Nations Educational and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, is facing a storm of criticism over its outrageous resolution on Jerusalem. The UN body rejected the historic Jewish connection to the Temple Mount and referred to all holy sites in the city only by their Islamic names. The policy shockingly disregarded the continuous presence of Jews in their ancestral city for the past 3,000 years and severed all Christian ties to Jerusalem by default. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and UNESCO's own Director General, Irina Bokova, distanced themselves from the Palestinian-sponsored text. The Temple Mount is the holiest site in Judaism, where both biblical temples once stood. The Western Wall perimeter around the complex remains the center of Jewish spiritual life.
The entire world was stunned by the UNESCO vote. Tens of thousands of people signed a number of petitions demanding that the agency immediately recognize the deep historic, cultural, and religious connection between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. Here in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the UN the theater of the absurd. He said that the bizarre proclamation that the Jewish state has no connection to the Western Wall is like saying that China has no connection to its own Great Wall or Egypt with the pyramids. Netanyahu said that it's obvious no one at UNESCO ever read the Bible. He also advised the members to examine the engraving of the seven-branched menorah on the Arch of Titus that was looted by the Romans when they destroyed the Second Temple. That candelabra, which served as the emblem of the Jewish people 2,000 years ago, is still used to symbolize the Jewish state today. Netanyahu concluded by saying that UNESCO lost whatever little legitimacy it ever had, and that he firmly believes that the historical truth will prevail. Israel's Minister of Education, Naftali Bennett, suspended all Israeli cooperation with the UN cultural body. Bennett said that the development not only denies history, but encourages terror because it rewards the supporters of jihad in Jerusalem and even more attacks against Jews in the city.
Wahid Abdullah al-Bursh, the disgraced senior United Nations engineer in Gaza, has formally been charged with abusing his post to aid Hamas. The indictment against 38-year-old al-Bursh includes allegations that he took construction supplies meant for civilians and instead used the material to build a base for terrorist naval commandos in the northern Gaza Strip. The Palestinian suspect was arrested in September following an undercover operation by Israel's Shin Bet security agency. He has worked for the UN since 2003. News of the embezzlement came directly on the heels of the arrest of an even more shocking occurrence at World Vision. The Gaza manager of operations at the largest international Christian aid foundation in the world was caught allegedly channeling tens of millions of dollars in charity money to Hamas terrorists in the Palestinian enclave.
Israeli Arabs continue to encourage terrorism by praising the murder of Jews in the streets of Jerusalem. The public was appalled to see that the 39-year-old terrorist who opened fire on October 9th was memorialized with huge Hamas flags decorating his Jerusalem home. Muslim relatives celebrated the assailant's shooting to death of a 60-year-old Jewish grandmother and a 29-year-old police officer by handing out candy from the family shop. The terrorist's 14-year-old daughter was filmed calling her father a great man while expressing pride and happiness over his heinous acts of murder and martyrdom. Both the Fatah and Hamas Palestinian factions praised the killer and his drive-by shooting as heroic. And as part of the Arab blood festivities, the official Palestinian soccer team posed with a banner featuring a photograph of the terrorist.
Well, it's that time when the winners of this year's Nobel Prizes are being announced. The Jewish world was especially honored when the 2016 surprise pick for excellence in literature went to a Jewish-American songwriter who was born as Robert Zimmerman, but you probably know him better by his stage name, Bob Dylan. The Swedish Academy said the 75-year-old performer was given the award for his profound impact on popular music and American culture, marked by lyrical compositions of extraordinary poetic power. By the way, more than half of the Nobel Prizes awarded to nations in the Middle East have been won by Israel. There have been 12 Nobel laureates from the Jewish state out of a total of 22 prizes that have gone to the region.
The Jewish state just greeted dozens of new immigrants who arrived from Ethiopia. The warm welcoming ceremony was hosted by the Israeli Minister of Immigrant Absorption, Sofa Landver, at the Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. The first groups of Ethiopian Jews were airlifted to Israel in the 1980s and 90s, following a rabbinical finding that the community descended from the biblical tribe of Dan. So far, about 135,000 Jews of Ethiopian origin have been brought to Israel, where the total population just reached a little over 8 million. Since their arrival, Ethiopian Jews have joined the ranks of legislators, as well as the officer corps of the country's military. According to Jewish Agency Chairman Natan Sharansky, a plan to completely reunify the Israeli families with relatives that they left behind in the African nation is now in its final stages. A team of scholars has just published the texts of 25 never-before-seen fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. The parchments date back 2,000 years and contain passages from 18 books in the Hebrew Bible, including Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Proverbs, and Psalms. There's even script that appears to be from the book of Nehemiah, which, if authenticated, would be the very first ever found. Since 1947, nearly 900 manuscripts have been located in some 11 caves from the archaeological site of Qumran in the Judean desert near the Dead Sea. Most of the scrolls were written by a Jewish sect known as the Essenes and hidden around the year 70 of the Common Era during the Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire. U.S. businessman Steve Green, who heads the Hobby Lobby arts and crafts chain, owns 13 of the newly published fragments. You'll soon be able to see them for yourselves at the Museum of the Bible, set to open a year from now in Washington, D.C.
Moving from the ancient world to the modern, and given Israel's reputation as one of the world's most innovative high-tech hubs, it's often difficult to remember that the tiny country is only about the size of New Jersey. More than 300 multinational companies have now opened research and development facilities in the Jewish state. Many big firms around the world are also investing in the startup nation. Google has already snapped up 5 Israeli companies, such as the Waze navigation system, for more than $1 billion. The general manager of Microsoft's Global Accelerators division said Israel was the first R&D center his company has set up outside the U.S. because the tech world in Israel is advanced and unstoppable. Intel was among the first to open a branch in the country 40 years ago, and it currently employs a whopping 11,000 local workers. Not to be left out, Amazon and Apple are getting in on the action. They are among the latest international companies to recognize the value of developing several of their own cutting-edge products with Israeli know-how and expertise.
Israel, the light unto the nations, today faces attack from more than just rockets and terrorism. Calls to boycott, sanction, and divest from Israel, known as BDS, are a form of economic warfare that you can help to prevent. The Israel Allies Foundation has launched a public service campaign called Defeat BDS, offering educational tools and other resources that you can use to stand with Israel and help make a difference. Just visit the easy-to-use website at www.defeatbds.org.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful sunny day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Joe Sabag. He's the U.S. Director of the Israel Allies Foundation. Joe, thanks for being on the show.
It's great to be back, Josh.
Joe, tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Israel Allies Foundation.
Well, the Israel Allies Foundation is a policy and advocacy organization that is basically in the business of resourcing legislators and large grassroots organizations with the education and other information that they need in order to more effectively do their job. So in the case of the legislators, we're giving them advanced research and legal advice on how they can better do their job legislatively. And then as far as the grassroots organizations, they really need some support on how to better educate their own constituencies so that they can mobilize their people in the civic process as well.
Recently, you just launched the Defeat BDS campaign. Tell our viewers a little about what is Defeat BDS.
Well, BDS is boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. It's an alternative form of warfare being conducted against Israel that really corresponds to a lot of the political problems we see Israel facing in the international arena. And so we're rolling out a campaign that corresponds to a lot of the legislation that hopefully viewers have started seeing go through their own state legislatures. The campaign is designed to provide at-home advocates with the information and educational resources that they need to better engage in the civic process, and to likewise help educate friends and colleagues and others who might care to get involved.
It's unique in the rollout of the Defeat BDS campaign that you're actually gearing the campaign towards Bible-believing Christians. Why do you think Bible-believing Christians has a stake in the fight against BDS? Well,
there's no question that Bible-believing Christians are by far the most important demographic that Israel needs to further harness a relationship with. For these folks, they really have a major stake in the game because of their interest in religious freedom here in Israel. Frankly, BDS is designed to harm Israel in such a way, as we've seen recently in UNESCO and elsewhere, through economics and likewise through cultural warfare. For example, UNESCO's decision to try and suggest that Jerusalem was not, and the Temple Mount, in fact, was not at ever any point Jewish, which inherently includes a rejection of the idea that there's any Christian attachment. So our Christian friends are not just supporters on the sideline, they're actual stakeholders.
You know, what are some things that Christians can actually do on the ground?
Well, for starters, they need to educate others. Where they have relationships with people who are in policy-making positions, those are very important opportunities to step in and make sure that folks have the information that they need to take advantage of those opportunities. And then likewise, making sure that at the grassroots level that the cultural groundswell of support for Israel is something more than just rhetorical, that it actually translates into effective engagement in the civic process.
You mentioned before that there are several states, I think 13 now, that have taken bold action against the BDS through legislation. Why is this important for American states to fight the BDS right now?
American states enjoy a lot of trade and exchange with Israel in very important economic sectors. We're talking about health sciences, law enforcement, and advanced technologies. A lot of these states have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars at stake in terms of exports, and likewise corresponding to that, we have employment interests in U.S.-based companies that are also facing attack. It's not simply Israeli companies that are being attacked by the BDS movement. It's also U.S.-based companies that do business here in Israel. So the states have a very strong interest in, first of all, protecting their own economic and employment interests, and second of all, making sure that they're well positioned to participate in a very competitive part of the global marketplace, which Israel certainly has become, thankfully, over the last number of years.
How important are these legislations to defeating BDS? Do you think they'll have an impact in the end?
Absolutely. Our philosophy is that public policy is really the starting point for fighting back against the broader cultural war that Israel faces. So if we have the opportunity, first of all, to treat BDS within its commercial manifestation, simply in terms of making sure that economically it's a toothless movement and not a very good expenditure of time for folks who want to attack Israel. Moving on from that, it's important for people, in the public, students and others, to be able to point to these expressions of public policy and to say, hey, the government is already on our side here in this instance. So you truly are a movement without much merit and certainly without any support from the government.
Joe, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
It's a very simple message. Everybody has the opportunity to make a difference. There is no such thing as wasted effort. And as my father and grandfather always told me, you don't have to be in the IDF to be a soldier who stands up for Israel. These opportunities come to each of us, and if we simply commit ourselves to making the most of them, then a difference absolutely will happen with God's help.
Thank you, Joe, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren HaYesod. I'm Eliezer Moody Sandberg, World Chairman of Keren HaYesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Today, you will witness the fulfillment of biblical prophecy through the gathering of the exiles. God bless you from Jerusalem.
אני כל כך קשורה לישראל, שלא משנה איזה תחרות אני עושה, קטנה, גדולה, כל פעם שאני רואה דגל ישראל זה עושה לי צמרמורת בגוף. אולימפיאדה זה חלום של כל ספורטאי, אני חושבת. איך שנכנסנו לאולימפיאדה, לכפר אולימפי, ראינו הספורטאים הכי טובים שיש, באמת, כאילו, מכל העולם אמרנו, וואו, גם אנחנו ביניהם. אין לי מדינה אחרת. זה הבית שלי.
העלייה לישראל היא עוזרת להגשים לי את החלומות שלי, היא עוזרת לממש את השאיפות שלי ואת הפוטנציאל שלי כאומן. למרות שהמשפחה שלי היא משפחה יהודית, עד גיל 14 בערך לא היה לי שמץ של מושג מה זה להיות יהודי, חוץ מזה שזה לא הנושא שכדאי לדבר עליו בקרב החברים ובבית ספר ובמקומות ציבוריים בכלל. לא פחדתי לעלות כי ידעתי שאני לא אהיה לבד. לא פחדתי לעלות כי ידעתי שלמרות שאני עוזב את הבית והמשפחה שלי לא תהיה איתי, אבל יהיה מאחוריי גב.
If you've taken all the messages and all the education that we received, which come as no surprise of my desire to establish and live a life in Israel, I still see myself as an Oleh Hadash or new immigrant. My current role at Bank Leumi, which allows me to act as an ambassador both for the bank and for the State of Israel, makes me feel like I've come full circle. We have a people who for the past 60 years, despite challenges, despite hardships, despite a war every decade, continue to succeed on an international scale. This is a land of modern day heroes.
הגעתי מטרנסילבניה, ברומניה, הייתי בן 14. כאן ראיתי פעם ראשונה חיבור בראייתי מדהים בין השורשים שלנו, תורת ישראל, עם ישראל וארץ ישראל. כל אחד מכם כאן יכול להגיע, כי נותנים לו את ההזדמנות, הרבה בזכות קרן היסוד והתרומות שאנשים טובים נותנים, להתחנך, לגדול ולהיות יום אחד מן הימים רופא, פרופסור באוניברסיטה, רב, מדען או אלוף בצה"ל. בלעדיכם התורמים היה קשה למדינת ישראל להתמודד עם האתגר הזה ולהבטיח שאנחנו לאורך זמן נממש את החלום שלנו להקים מדינה בטוחה ובית לעם היהודי.
The Aliyah is the new blood that have to be constantly injected to make us better people. And in order to make us better people, we need Aliyah.
The majority of Israelis, in one way or the other, are either Olim themselves or descendants of Olim. And this is the power of the state. It's a major force.
Come join Keren HaYesod in fulfilling biblical prophecy. Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, call us at 1-800-505-1665 or visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Dear Arab citizens of Israel, Muatinuna al-Arab al-Aiza. Before my election, I said Arab voters were going to the polls in droves. I was referring to a specific political party, but many people were understandably offended. I apologize for how my comment was misunderstood. But today I want to go further. Today I'm asking Arab citizens in Israel to take part in our society in droves, work in droves, study in droves, thrive in droves. Israel is strong because of our diversity and pluralism, not in spite of it. Over 20% of Israel's citizens are Arabs, and you have achieved incredible heights. Supreme Court justices, members of parliament, renowned authors, entrepreneurs, high-tech business owners, doctors, pharmacists. I'm proud of the role Arabs play in Israel's success. I want you to play an even greater role in it. Now, respecting minorities isn't just the right thing to do. It's critical to our progress. But talking about equality of opportunity, that's not enough. Action is what matters. My government recently passed a resolution to invest massive resources in Arab communities. Arab communities are receiving unprecedented support for public infrastructure, for transportation, for employment, for welfare, for so many other things. And the reason for this is simple, because your future is our future. Yet significant gaps remain. I will never forget the conversation I had in a Knesset committee with a young Muslim woman. Her husband and sons were gunned down in an Arab town. She was shaking. She begged me, she said, "Prime Minister, please increase law and order in the community where I live." And this is exactly what we're doing. Yesterday, the government approved legislation that would significantly strengthen public safety for Arab towns and villages. They're yearning to be free from a life of crime and violence. My vision is that young Arab boys and girls grow up knowing they can achieve anything in Israel as valued and equal citizens in our democracy. Today, I ask you all to join me in this effort. Now, each of us has a role to play. Jews and Arabs should reach out to each other, get to know each other's families, listen to each other. Jews and Arabs should treat one another with the same dignity and respect you'd want for your own family. Our land is too small, it's too precious to fill it with discord and hate. Let us work together, Arabs and Jews alike, to reach ever higher in the noble pursuit of equality and dignity for all. This is my vision, and I'm sure it's yours too.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Today we're at Ben Gurion Airport to welcome 211 French immigrants who are arriving today to make Israel their home.
It's like a dream. Everybody is here. There are lots of happiness, lots of simcha. It's a great, great day. It's really moving. The Jewish state is so important for the Jewish people, and seeing Jewish people coming from abroad, from all over the world to make their lives here in Israel is such a brave move.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה.
I feel excited. It takes me back to my own Aliyah, and I always think about 1,000 years of dreams and prayers, and what a great circle each of these people is closing.
וכל אחד מכם היום עשה צעד ענק לבנות עתיד יותר בטוח לכם, לילדים שלכם ולכל אחד מאיתנו, למדינת ישראל.
Je suis très très contente. Merci d'être avec nous et de partager nos joies. Je suis très très contente d'être là pour accueillir les 200 Olim de France. Am Israel Chai ושלום לכולם. תודה רבה et merci à tous.
The Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, has been our friend for many, many years. We work with them, and their donations and their help make days like today possible. Christians around the world, they are our best friends. And Christians and Jews, we belong together.
If you could sense the excitement in this room today and the dancing, you'd have wanted to dance too. The songs that were sung were rejoicing in God's faithfulness, the covenant-keeping God who keeps his promises to his people. If you want to be a part of helping more people return to Israel, go to icej.org/aliyah.
In 1980, the Israeli parliament passed a law declaring a united Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the State of Israel. Threatened by the Arab League with an oil embargo, national embassies in Jerusalem closed their doors. That same year, Christians from around the world gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. Sensing the isolation of the Israeli people, the participants and leaders of this gathering decided to establish the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem.
The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is since more than 30 years right here in Jerusalem to connect the global church with the nation of Israel. For many Jewish people throughout the centuries, the only face of Christianity, what they experienced, was the ugly face of anti-Semitism, of Christians persecuting the Jewish people wherever they found them. As Christian Embassy, we are here in Israel to show a new face of the church, a new face of Jesus Christ to the Jewish people.
The mission of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is fourfold: to educate the global church about Israel through events, television programs, and print publications, to promote Christian celebration in Israel and around the world through the annual Feast of Tabernacles celebration, to mobilize the worldwide body of Christ in prayer for Israel, influencing global leaders and ICEJ representatives in over 80 nations, and to show compassion to the people of Israel through social projects that are changing lives in every sector of Israeli society. To learn more about the ICEJ and how you can partner with us, visit icej.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.